the topic is leadership during a crisis. We had a political earthquake this weekend. I know you've come to some conclusions about what you're doing in this election. Why don't you share where you've come out?
Yeah, I mean, first thing, I cannot stress enough the debt of gratitude that we all owe to President Biden for his 50 plus years of service. This is a man of such extraordinary decency and integrity and honor. And I think particularly in this moment, when people have and exhibit those qualities, you don't take it for granted because not everybody does. And so to have a chance, and the fact that I've had the honor of working very closely with him over these past 18 months has just been an absolute joy. And I had a chance to have a lengthy conversation with him yesterday. I was telling him how much I appreciated him, and he said, Gov, this is not an obituary. I'm still going to be here till January. And he told me he's planning on very much running through the tape. And I'm planning on running through the tape with him. And I did. I also, while I thought it was appropriate that yesterday was about the president and honoring his service, that I think today is about representing the future and what I think is a very hopeful future. So I have come out and given my full-throated endorsement to make Kamala Harris the next president of the United States. I'll say, so many of the accomplishments that we've been able to get done have happened in partnership with the Biden-Harris administration. And I do think it's important that people remember that. This is the Biden-Harris administration. They've had these accomplishments together. And so the work that has happened, the work that has taken place in our state that we are incredibly proud of. I mean, our state is moving, and it's moving something special right now. But that's happened because we've had the right partners, and I'm incredibly encouraged and excited about what the next 4 years it will look like having someone like President Kamala Harris as my partner inside this work. So I'm excited to support her in that.
So you spoke with her yesterday, I think, too.
I did.
Today. How did that conversation go?
That was wonderful. She's another one who's been a tremendous partner with me for throughout my entire time as governor. And I had a lengthy conversation with her yesterday as well. I committed to both her and the president that they would have my full support, and that she was going to have my full support going into this election. And I do think it's important that people know too that it's not, for me, this is not political. And frankly, if anything, I'm not too good at the political thing. I'm still. This is my first office I've ever held. It was governor. So I guess I'm still learning this political thing. My support of the vice president is not political. My support of the vice president is because I've seen her in action. My support of the vice president is because on March 26th, when the Key Bridge collapsed, that one of the first phone calls that I got was also from her and pledging her support to the state of Maryland and saying that she was in lockstep, because I just finished speaking with the president, saying she was in lockstep with the president on the fact that the country was standing with Maryland in that moment. And I cannot tell you enough as a chief executive how much that meant. And I think together we really have shown what it means to be, Maryland tough and Baltimore strong. And I'm excited about seeing her continued work and her continued leadership continue to be elevated. I think it's going to be an exciting time for the country, and I'm here for it.
One more political question, then we're going to talk about jobs. When George Clooney wrote his op-ed, and he said, let's have an open primary or mini primary, and then he listed who he wanted to see it, and he listed you first, and I know that's not alphabetical because neither W nor M are that early in the alphabet. Did that give you any thought, and did you have any thought as this last few weeks have played out about doing something, whether on the top or on the second slot of the ticket this year?
No, I mean, So I remember when a group and people came to me to consider running for mayor of Baltimore. This was back in like 2015. And I said that that's not what I wanted to do, and it's not the direction I want to go in. I remember after, one of my mentors was the late, great Elijah Cummings. And I remember after he deserves a round of applause. He was an extraordinary leader. And I remember after he passed that a group came and said, we'd like for you to consider running for his seat. And I remember when I decided to run for governor, there was nobody who could have told me no, because I'd done the work. And I knew exactly what our state needed. I knew exactly the direction that I wanted our state to go in. I knew that we could build the right kind of coalition. I don't think that these seats are things that people can be recruited or drafted for. I think you need to know in your heart that this is the right path for you. And I am absolutely in love with my state. I'm in love with our people. I'm in love with the direction that our state is going in right now. The momentum that we have in the state of Maryland, it is unparalleled around the country right now. And I'm excited to see this thing through. Because when I say that this is going to be Maryland's decade, I mean that. And I'm excited to be the leader that Maryland's going to have going forward. And I'm excited to stay there.
Maybe really quickly for those who aren't as familiar with your story. I'm very familiar with the story. As you know, Governor, we both have written memoirs. They came out on the exact same day more than a decade ago. And I remember that, when you have a book come out, you're like, oh, what else is coming out? I'm like, the other Wes Moore, I'm like, all right, there are two memoirs, but that guy there are two Wes Moores, and I don't even know what that's about. I'm not worried about it. And then you went up on the bestseller list, and you can see mine. You can get mine for about $2 on Amazon right now. But so I've known your story over a decade. But maybe a quick version for those who are less familiar about how you're a true son of Baltimore, but somebody who's taken a long journey. Because getting back to the topic, leadership during crisis. You've had many crises in your life.
Yeah. Well, it's and it's true because some of my earliest memories were actually of tragedy. Where I was born down in Tacoma Park down in Maryland, all right, hey now, but I moved when I was young because one of the first memories I had was when my dad died in front of me when I was 3 years old because he didn't get the health care he needed. I saw how economic inequality, and I think a lot of this goes back to the jobs conversation, I saw what that looks like firsthand because my mother didn't get her first job that gave her benefits until I was 14 years old. And by the way, this is a woman who went on to earn a master's degree, right? So when we're having conversations about inequitable pay between men and women or the racial wealth gap, I don't need a white paper to explain it. I grew up in that. That I was a person who joined the military when I was 17 years old. I graduated from a 2-year college. So when we see how these paths oftentimes they just move differently. And not everybody's going to have that same type of path. Part of the reason that we put such a focus on that in our administration is from a very personal place. That if we can do a better job of actually creating real opportunities, real pathways, real economic growth vehicles for people, then I think we're going to do a better job of actually having an economy that works for everybody. And when you have an economy that works for everybody, you actually have an economy that works. And until that point, you will not. And so that's why I think that's been a real focus of the work we've done.
So let's talk about the Key Bridge as an example. It's a disaster, but it's also potentially an opportunity. So how are you trying to pivot from what obviously was a disaster to something that maybe can yield benefits?
Yeah, I mean, that was something that was just extraordinary. That morning, waking up at 2:02 in the morning and realizing that 13% of your state's economy was now shut down. That tens of thousands of workers were just hours away from waking up and realizing they no longer had a job. And by the way, knowing that 900 small businesses that relied on port workers that now realized they no longer had customers, and we still had 6 people that we were searching for, that were unaccounted for. And I think about the heroism of the first responders who just did an absolutely remarkable job. I mean, they saved countless lives that morning, and they will always have not just my debt of gratitude and admiration, but will have my love for the work that they did to save so many Marylanders that morning. But I also think about the fact that when people said, well, this is going to have a significant impact on Maryland's economy. What's the unemployment rate going to be like in the month of April? And so we were able to work together, work across the aisle, work with members of our Department of Labor, work with members of the Biden-Harris administration, and work with the private sector, where we created a pact called the Maryland Tough Baltimore Strong Alliance, which was private sector companies that said, we will not lay off workers, even if we know this is going to create an economic hardship. People who said that even if we have to temporarily relocate our business to another port, that as soon as the Port of Baltimore reopened, that we would return it back to the Port of Baltimore, giving us the ability to not just be aggressively defensive, but aggressively offensive. That we were able to make sure that our workers were not laid off and received their unemployment insurance and being able to put millions of dollars going towards making sure we were protecting our port workers and also their family members. And so when people said, well, what was the economic result? What was the unemployment rate? We're proud to report that in the month of April, not only did Maryland continue to have one of the lowest unemployment rates in the entire country, in the month of April, Maryland actually gained over 7,000 jobs. And the thing that I think people saw and why that became so important is that Port of Baltimore really is the nation's port. 2/3 of the country get their goods from the Port of Baltimore. If you've ordered something from Amazon, there's a very good chance it came from the Port of Baltimore. It's a leading port in this country for trucks and new cars and agricultural equipment and coal and spices and sugars. This is indispensable for our American economy. And so what we just wanted to do was make sure that we can not only get that port reopened, and we were able to get the Port of Baltimore reopened. When people said it would take 11 months, we were able to work 24/7. We got that Port of Baltimore reopened in 11 weeks, when people said it would take 11 months. But also use it as a moment to think about a diversification of our economy. Use it as a moment to talk about what are the skill sets that we want to pipeline people towards. How do we think differently about economic pathways? And so we really found it, to your point, something that was a remarkably tragic moment. We did not want to have that moment where we could just sit there and focus on how to rebuild from the tragedy, but how do we use it to better prepare for the future going forward?
Well, let's talk about it, because we're here at Horizons, jobs, JFF, the whole point is creating 75 million jobs.
Right.
Over the next 8-10 years. What are you doing? I know you've taken a bunch of steps in terms of leveling the playing field, but really creating that pathway for jobs, because it can't be fixed. Again, these are not easy fixes. These have to be structural fixes. What are some of the, I know you have your Enough Act. Maybe talk about that.
It's so there's a few big things that we had to be able to do. One is you've got to create pathways for people who have different types of entry points into the workforce. And I say that as someone, I graduated from a 2-year college. I didn't have a traditional path. And so we said, while we have some of the best 4-year colleges in America in the state of Maryland, and we're very proud of that, we are going to end this myth that every single one of our students have to attend a 4-year college in order to be economically successful. It is not true. And frankly, the people who started that myth were the 4-year colleges, and so we just need to make sure that other people understand that doesn't have to be the pathway
They need
for
more
everybody.
customers.
They need more customers. We also needed to make sure that we're focused on things like job retraining and job reskilling platforms, trade programs, and apprenticeship programs. And it's why we've made historic investments in these type of pathways for people, particularly our young people, to explore the thing that makes their heart beat a little bit faster. It's the reason that Maryland now became the first state in this country that has a service year option for all of our high school graduates, where high school graduates now in the state of Maryland have a chance when they finish high school, they can have a year of service to the state of Maryland. And they can choose however they want to do it. And we did it because we're big believers in experiential learning, big believers in earned financial cushions, big believers that in this time of political divisiveness and vitriol, that service will save us when you get people to work together. But also, big believers in workforce development, because some of the first organizations that were signing up to say we'll take individuals on were members of the private sector and members who are part of our trade unions, because they said if you could find a way to partner your ambition with your hopes and aspiration, that could be something really interesting. And so we've really tried to do a good job of making sure we have this focus on work, wages, and wealth. Get people into the workforce. Make sure they're getting paid fair wages for the work that they are doing and not disincentivizing work. And then focusing on wealth, giving people the opportunity to earn more than they owe, giving them an opportunity to become part of an ownership society and an ownership culture, making sure that our young people are being taught how not just to be employees, but how to be employers, making sure we're actually creating an economy that works for everybody and that people see themselves growing in. That has been our focus, and frankly, when you're looking at the state of Maryland and the data continues to show, it's working. So we're just going to keep on doing it.
We're out of time, but I do want to end with one last question. You talked about national service policy. I actually wrote my college thesis on national service policy with the idea that the countries that have that are more unified, and right now we're at a moment where we don't feel very unified. Maybe based on your life experience and also some of the policies you're putting forward, give us maybe a note of optimism on how we can go forward in a unified bipartisan way.
We need to learn to serve together. I remember I had people who I served with in Afghanistan. I was a member of the 82nd Airborne Division. I led soldiers overseas in combat. And I remember I had people who I served with in the military who came and campaigned for me when I ran for governor. Many of them were not Marylanders. Many of them were not Democrats. But they just came to come door knock on my behalf because they were simply saying, let me tell you about the guy that I served with. I believe deeply that service will save us because service is sticky. Those who serve together generally stay together. And when I look at the fact that we have introduced, since I've been the governor, we've introduced 26 pieces of legislation. We've gone 26 for 26, but importantly, we've gone 26 for 26 bipartisan. We've gotten Democrat and Republican support on every single bill that we have introduced. But the reason why that matters also is this. It's because we asked for it. It's because we met people where they were. It's because we went to people's constituents and told them, you should really contact your delegate and tell them to vote for this package. If we can be a society that gets to know each other again, I think we can actually be a society that can grow together. And so I just believe, I believe, and I think, my life is a testament, and I think our administration is a testament, that we are much closer than sometimes we're told that we are. And if we can really be a society that gets to know each other again, if we can be a society that serves together, then we're going to be a society that's going to be unstoppable. But we've got to have a focus of being able to say, I am going to be my brothers and my sisters' keeper. And that if we are all God's children, then by definition, we are brothers and sisters, and we should really start acting accordingly.